Good evening and welcome to the NDTV Dialogues, a conversation of ideas. Tonight, the 16th Lok Sabha has a record number of first-time MPs. Fresh minds, fresh ideas, a celebration of democracy. But does this actually set a new agenda? How do we escape the politics of the past or embrace the best of tradition as we look at a new future? Joining me tonight, an entire panel of first-time MPs, different ages, different backgrounds, but some commonalities as well. With me this evening, Professor Sugata Bose of the Trinamool Congress, Jayant Sinha of the BJP, Kavitha of the Telangana Rashtra Samithi, and Gaurav Gogoi of the Congress. Also with me, an observer of the political churn, Professor Shiv Visvanathan. Professor Bose, an eminent historian, a professor at Harvard, and now a Lok Sabha MP. What perspective has your career in academia, your career outside India and Indian politics given to you when you fought an Indian election and now an MP in Parliament?
Well, we all have multiple identities, and my primary identity is one of a historian and a scholar, and I'm trying to make a contribution in the field of public service. But even when I started my own historical research, my early work was on economic history and agrarian economy, and I had traveled in every district of West Bengal at that stage. And it was fascinating for me to go back to rural Bengal. My constituency is half urban and half rural. And it was an educational experience for me. Once you're in the fray, you actually begin to learn about the problems that ordinary people face in our country. And as for my experience abroad, what that gives me is an interest in foreign affairs. So I'm going to try and carve out certain spheres of activity for myself as a parliamentarian. I'll focus on issues of education and health so far as domestic problems are concerned. And I would also wish to play a part in the shaping of new innovative foreign policy for our country.
Mr. Sinha, when you fight an election and when you come in new to a party in a sense, you will face that accusation of being an outsider. Now, you spent your professional career in a sense in, you were in McKinsey, you were a hedge fund investor. You dealt with sums of money which seem like dreams for your constituents. I mean, you're of course from Hazaribagh in Jharkhand. How did you reconcile that difference? How do you make sure that this goes beyond lip service and campaign to concrete service really to what the people of a constituency need?
Well, you know, as Professor Bose was saying, we all have multiple identities. I would say that I have multiple lives as well, because along with my professional life, for the last 16 years or so, ever since my father became finance minister, I have been drawn and pulled into politics and public life in India. So whether it had to deal with public policy or it had to deal with the day-to-day campaigning and, you know, just being right there at the grassroots and working with people, I've been kind of leading two lives at the same time. I was also born in that part of the world. I was born in Giridih, which just is adjoining Hazaribagh, and I spent the first few years of my life there. So I really do feel very connected to Jharkhand and Hazaribagh. And so while you know, I participated quite actively in my father's campaigns, when I started my own campaign this time, it was also an opportunity for me to get back to my roots and reconnect with everything that was, you know, really near and dear to my heart. And so because of the fact that I had all these different experiences, I think I could relate to people, whether it's in a boardroom in New York, whether it is, you know, with a business person in Mumbai, or whether it's a villager in Tatia Jhadia block in Hazaribagh. So, you know, one has to be able to understand people, one has to be able to empathize, one has to recognize what their issues are and challenges are, and then you set aside one life.
Or mindset in a sense.
And that's right. And then you pick up the concerns and issues of people in that setting, and that's how you relate to them.
Ms. Kavitha, in a sense, your experience has been different because, I mean, your father, of course, currently Chief Minister, but you've been much more involved in some sense in political and public life. That's been your education in a way. You haven't come into politics at the same age as Professor Bose and Jayant Sinha have. Do you think being a professional politician, in a sense, is a good thing? Or do you think it's actually better to perhaps go out, have different experiences and then bring that perspective in? Nowadays, professional politicians aren't looked upon very highly.
That's one bad thing, and I think as first timers and also young politicians, we all need to get the dignity back to politics as well. And as you rightly said, it is full-time politicians is looked down upon, but full-time politicians is what we need now, because we have a lot of part-time politicians who are half into politics and half into business, and they do not concentrate here much on the people, so they miss out on the opportunities of helping their people out in every possible way. Like I've been in the Telangana movement for past 7 years, been very close with the rural folk and all, so I would understand their needs and necessities much better than a part-time politician, I would say. Although it is being looked upon, it is a profession that one cannot do away with. We are there, we have to be there, and politicians have to be there. Well, there must be bad ones also, but we want to be good, and people should help us to be good also.
I'm going to come back to that part-time politician because it's an interesting aspect. But Gaurav Gogoi, it's an interesting time for you, and of course there was within the Congress party in Assam some disenchantment when you came back. You got a ticket straight away, and you won an election at a time when most Congress MPs didn't. Has that been tough for you? Because in a sense, you're the newest. You haven't spent years like Kavitha has as part of a movement. You haven't gone and built up a separate career and then come on the strength of that. You've just come in a sense, as the son of a chief minister.
Well, I think what really helped me during this election campaign was the fact that I had over 7 to 8 years in experience in public policy and non-profit. So having worked in grassroots development in India, in the states of Rajasthan and Uttarakhand, and having studied public policy outside as well, when I connected to people and people's grievances, I was able to feel it. I was able to synergize with them, and plus I was not in uncharted territory or unfamiliar territory when I was working in the villages and towns of Assam. And what people saw refreshing in my approach was that not only was I proud of my father's identity, but also I tried to bring upon my own set of new ideas. So having started 2 non-profits, one in the area of foreign policy, the other in the area of agriculture, looking at teaching organic farming to children living in rural areas. So people saw a genuine sincerity, and I think at this time and age where people are slightly disconnected from the world of politics, what they really look for is genuineness and sincerity. And I think on the basis of those 2 values is what helped me in this election. And of course, going forward, when it comes to the next election, it would no longer matter whose son I am or whose brother I am. It would matter on the basis of what work have I done, how many times have I raised the issues of Assam in Parliament. So even it's been probably a month and a half in Delhi in Parliament, and I've already strived to make the voice of Assam heard, because that's the problem with Northeast as well, that we have so few MPs from Northeast India, and I'm talking about all the 6 sisters and 1 brother, that the fact is that our voices are not heard on important policy issues. So it's important for someone like me who has the grassroots connect as well as the policy background to make sure that we're heard, especially in the most recent case when Akha Saloni was found dead. It was just absolutely shocking that despite Anido Tania's case, we thought no more citizens from Northeast India would be harassed so openly. The 3 boys were just walking back to their house and they were just stopped and beaten to death. So that, issues need to be raised urgently, and I think that's my responsibility as well.
And then Professor Visvanathan, come in, and the interesting fact, of course, is, and we didn't go out looking for this, but it's interesting that everyone on this panel except you and me are the son and daughter of a political parent, and that I think some research was done, basically said about 130 MPs in this Lok Sabha do have a political connection, and of course Patrick French famously has talked about the genetic privilege of Indian politicians. I mean, the younger they are, the more likely they are to be son or daughter of a political parent. Do you think that's not necessarily a bad thing? I mean, that's just part of democracy. Or when we talk about a churn, is it then not that much of a churn at all?
See, if you look at it like a statistical trend, it could be burdensome. So you can have a genealogy of incompetence or a genealogy of competence. I think to a certain extent these MPs have to decide. Is it going to be burdensome? Are you going to take it only as a hereditary right? Or are you going to innovate on it? Are you going to use the fact, actually each one of them is both analyst and case study. That's what makes them interesting. Each of them has to talk about family background, not in a defensive posture, but saying, this helped me make certain choices. And they also say that each of us is more than family, because to a certain extent you have multiple identities, multiple careers. So in that sense, they're all full-time politicians I don't know what part-time politics means, because to a certain extent, I think that's the focus here. The question is not the backgrounds. Can they diversify the issues that go into Parliament? For me, that would be a more interesting question, and I'm waiting to see that.
In fact, I'll just go to K. Kavitha first on that, because Telangana is a fascinating case study in a sense, because it's our newest state, and of course we saw in the last Parliament session how much people said that, you know, the issues of a few MPs caused full days of Parliament sessions to be disrupted. How do you actually locate your regional perspective in a national perspective? Are you there as an MP of India, not just an MP of Telangana, focusing on regional issues? I mean, again, we see our MPs, first-time MPs also get too. Do we get caught up in the trivia about controversies about, say, Sania Mirza being made a brand ambassador, and then that becomes a huge issue? We've seen recently again the controversy of Shiv MPs force-feeding rotis. Do we get too diverted in Parliament by small issues, and do we not focus on the larger national picture? For you as an MP, your focus is Telangana or India?
See, the best part of India is we are very diverse. I mean, each state is very diverse, and that is an advantage as well as a challenge. So now I need to represent my region's goals, and I also have to look at India as a whole, because any person looking at me from the outside world will only think, what is she? She's an Indian lawmaker. He'll not think that I'm a Telangana MP or I represent Telangana. But for me, my people, I have to cater to their needs. I'll also have to participate in the lawmaking. I'll have to think also. Now, when we are talking about a particular law, Assam, it is a different situation. Jharkhand, it is a different situation. Bengal, it is different. Telangana, it is different. So now in Parliament, when we sit talk about a single law, all of us, in the back of our mind, something else is going on. You know, will it suit my people? Will it be good for them? Will they have advantage of it or not? I mean, we have to protect their rights. Also, we have to protect the, you know, image of our country. So it is very challenging. It is not an easy job.
You know, if I may come in over here just to talk about the image of the country, I think, and what you talked about related to Sania Mirza and what happened in Maharashtra Southern, I feel like this election is not just the clash of development and who has a better model for development, but it's a clash of ideas of what is our idea for India. It is an India where multiple identities can coexist, multiple ethnicities can coexist, people from different race, caste, gender, background, sexual preference can coexist, or is it a place where there is a majority and there is a clear minority? And I think that's something would be interesting to see in the coming days as well, because a lot of us are first-time MPs and we all come from different backgrounds. But what is the India that we are trying to build through our work? An India which is inclusive or an India which is exclusive?
Jayant Sinha, come in on that, because that I think is a slight Congress dig at the BJP. So go ahead and come in on that.
Well, I think it's very straightforward to answer that question, because we've said already in all of our campaigning that sabka saath, sabka vikas, right? So sabka, we're not saying it's a little bit here and a little bit there. We want to carry everybody along with us, and we want everybody to be thinking about the national interest. And of course, there is always a tension. You know, Professor Bose here is a professor of history, so he'll tell you that the whole notion of how you know, minority groups and majorities deal with each other in a society, how you build a constitution to protect minority rights. I mean, that is the stuff and fabric of democracy.
Professor
In my
Bose?
first speech in Parliament, I warned the government not to confuse majoritarianism with democracy and uniformity with unity. I think we have to recognize that the composition of the 16th Lok Sabha does not reflect the diversity of our country as well as it should. If you look at the 282 MPs of the ruling party who won, there is not a single Muslim. Of the 336 or so members of the NDA, only one member of Ramvilas Paswan's party is a Muslim. I think we can't wish that away, which is why I said that some of us need to articulate the needs and aspirations of underrepresented minorities in this Parliament. And Jayant is right, you know, democracy is something where a majority should be earned. If a majority is presented on a prefabricated religious platter, then that is not genuine democracy. Now, I have to say that, you know, in present company, I've heard Jayant speak on the budget. I spoke on the budget. I've seen Kavitha ji perform extremely well in Parliament. Young Gaurav Gogoi is doing well with his questions and speeches. And I do think that some of the new MPs even though they are not of a piece, some are young, others have a wealth of experience in some other field, have been raising the level of debate in this 16th Lok Sabha. But sometimes I feel deeply embarrassed at the behavior of some of my parliamentary colleagues. So it's a very mixed experience for me as a new MP.
No, all I would say to I just quickly, one quick thing I just say to Professor Bose, actually this parliament, the 16th Lok Sabha, is functioning quite well compared to what's happened in the past. It still isn't the Harvard faculty.
Though of course the BJP was the opposition who didn't let it function in the past.
Yes. Well, I have my colleagues from Telangana here as well.
Yeah, and Telangana, yes. I'm actually going to bring in Professor Shiv on that, because that is interesting. In fact, when the Trinamool Congress, when I think Mamata Banerjee said, we'll take back your one train, and I think many looked at that as a slightly immature response, because look at the budget as a holistic piece for India, rather than how many trains my particular state got, or rail ministers, we know from often their constituencies will get all the best routes or the best trains, but what about the rest of India? Come in, Professor Visvanathan, and really some would say what is the hanging sword of elections in a sense, because all these MPs know that to get re-elected, they better make sure they perform, or at least be seen to be performing. And that's why I've had senior parliamentarians tell me that, you know, the worst thing was when television went live, parliament went live, because we all have to perform, and it's the one or two MPs who think that if they perform and disrupt parliament, that their constituents will see them and say, you're doing a great job. And that's why, in some sense, the standard went down. That's a controversial view, but what do you think?
Yeah. I must first begin with a caveat.
Yes.
My friends in the BJP always say, we love you except on TV. So I have to say first, you know, when I see this kind of a gathering, there is a civility to it. There is a sense of civics. And you wish this was actually a blown-up version of Parliament. But it's not. I mean, when I see the sense of civility you're bringing, the word noise bothers me. And let me connect it to Sugata's idea of majoritarianism. Majoritarianism is not democracy. Because by that you're confusing elections and democracy. My fear in what you're saying, and my fear about majorities is this: the whole becomes less than the sum of the parts. The diversity these people are talking about is lost. And as a communication theorist, I'd ask you to change your definition of noise. Noise is unwelcome music. And it's time you listen to the music of the
No,
parts.
but can the parts become more than the whole? Because that was the problem,
No,
as I said as well.
I think that was the old fear. I think now what we're trying to do is to build a new model, a new imagination, a new idea of India.
You're going to have to force me to respond. You're going to have to force me to respond to that statement. Because I think, you know, a lot of the dialogue, you know, you're a professor, as is Professor Bose, of course, so you study definitions and labels very closely, as you all do. And so I think a lot of the discussion, dialogue we often have is about different definitions.
Sure.
So when I said noise, I meant it as sensationalism, unnecessary sensationalism that overtakes the media when we should be debating the really important issues.
That's how I actually brought it up.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
But I think that's where you've got to be careful.
However, I mean, I actually find it disconcerting and distressing that you would say that what my party represents is majoritarianism. I would reject that completely, because that's not at all what we have said in our campaign. That's not how we are operating as a government. That is not what we do in terms of a party, etc., etc. So no, I would not subscribe to that at all, and I'm happy to engage in a debate now or later on or in Parliament on that.
Like any academic, so am I. But let's make one thing.
Yes.
Your statements are promissory notes. Democracy hasn't cashed them in as yet. So if that's a promise of good behavior, I accept it. But I'd like to wait a few years.
Though, of course, I do have to say, and perhaps agree with Jayant and say that one thing this vote did show that, in a sense, the Indian voter was tired of the coalitions, where we talked about a very weak centre, and where in fact the states and regional parties seem to be acquiring a disproportionate influence over decisions taken at the centre. I think the vote, in a sense, was for a much stronger centre, and that's what we're currently seeing. But to ask about, when we talk about moving away from the politics of the past, and in a sense we are back to the dialogue of, you know, how much is my state getting and the federalism, but looking at how we move away from politics of the past. We saw an incident in the recent government when, of course, you had this whole cup panchayats and various decisions, and many young MPs from those areas were very, very wary about condemning cup panchayats, because they felt that this, you know, that analysts in studios perhaps didn't know what they're talking about. They had to worry about the votes of those people back home. But no, say for instance, if you take the issue about Section 377, now the BJP on record has said that, you know, we will not support repealing it. The UPA kind of flip-flopped about it and then eventually changed its mind and went ahead and said we're against Section 377, we think it should go. The BJP has not made it stand clear on that, even though many MPs within the BJP think that it should go, but it goes against what the BJP voter or the so-called BJP voter is seen as wanting. How would you reconcile that?
I would say very much that we are a government that's been in power for 60 days. These are very complicated, difficult issues. We want to have.
This is not that complicated or difficult, actually.
We want to have a considered view on many things. There are implications on many of these issues that we want to think through, that we can implement, and that are appropriate for the country as well. So we have to deal with these issues in a way that is thoughtful and diligent.
Gaurav Gogoi, comment on that, because the Congress, I think, faced certain flack, and you've done it again in Maharashtra, that just before the elections, you announced a quota for Jats. Now in Maharashtra, you announce a quota for Marathas. So you've got more and more dominant castes, I mean, who would have cringed many years ago to be called backward in any sense, who are now getting reservations because it's seen as a vote bank, or it's seen as a way of winning elections.
Right. So what I think,
how do you support that as a young MP?
Again, you have to understand the community. You cannot enter into a dialogue with such a rigid position, saying that this is absolutely wrong. It's only when you dialogue, when you listen to each other's values, when they hear what I'm trying to say, and I hear what they're trying to say, and we try to find something common that we're saying both, that I might be talking about empowerment at the end of it, that's my basic value. That other person is also talking about basic value, about upliftment, about a better chance, about a better life. And now we've come to the middle. We've reached at a consensus that we both agree that it's about uplifting ourselves. Now, only way of disagreement is that you think reservation is the way ahead, and I think if you get a good job and if you get a good salary and if you promote yourself as a good role model, and that's where we can have a conversation on it.
Can I come in on reservations?
Yes.
See, in Telangana, we had offered to give 12% reservations to the Muslim minorities, because ours was a predominantly Muslim state, earlier ruled by a Muslim ruler, and there were a lot of them in the government jobs. But as the time progressed, you don't even see 2% of the Muslims holding government jobs, or 2% of the Muslims getting good quality education. So if reservations are for sincerely uplifting them and putting them back into the mainstream society, I think we should go ahead and I sincerely believe that reservation should be only for one generation. Like they should have a cap of creamy layer.
Reservation as a magic pill will not work. It has to be part of a holistic set of
well,
strategies.
It didn't work in the last election.
Exactly.
I don't know it will work in Maharashtra.
It's not a magic pill. And the sooner parties realize that it's not a magic pill, it will not win you votes, it will not even help you in your original objective of uplifting someone. You need a holistic set of strategies, and the basic two foundations that you need to follow is health and education. In the end, it's a healthier society and a much more educated society which will stand on its own feet and lift itself up through its boots.
But also to just bring in that perspective, because we discussed two separate Section 377 reservations, and it's interesting that in a sense, at least his first-time MPs haven't said anything very different from what we heard from five-time MPs perhaps.
No, I think there's a difference. First, I'll give you an example. Have you heard the number of times the word holism was used here? Even academic seminars can't match it. Okay? But
they're better spoken. Okay.
Yeah, no, I think it's impressive.
Okay, great.
I think some of us can afford to take or articulate some independent positions on key issues. It is virtually impossible in this day and age for an independent to win an election. You need organizational resources and financial resources of a kind that makes independent candidates non-viable in our political system. But it looks as if many of our political parties have chosen to give nominations to unusual people who are not professional politicians, and I think there ought to be a good mix of full-time professional politicians and people who have some kind of a lateral entry from other professions. And members of the latter category ought to able to push the boundaries of debate and try to take new positions. And I think the leaderships of the parties should be a little more tolerant of some variations on a particular theme.
You're a rare exception, of course, as an academic entrant as opposed to a film star entrant, Professor Bose.
Sure. I mean, of course, different walks of life are represented in our parliamentary party. What I would say is that we could take a new kind of position on reservation in education, but we also have to accept the reality. We were just talking about how Muslims have been sort of left behind in Telangana. The same is true in West Bengal. After 34 years of communist rule, we found that Muslims did not have equal opportunity in education, in jobs, in housing, and so on. So some degree of affirmative action was called for. Even in an elite institution which I was advising, I'm chairing the presidency mentor group, I was aghast to see the underrepresentation of minorities. And there, it's not a throwback to the old politics or the old culture of reservations, but simply to recognize that there have been social exclusions which have to be addressed in some way, not through that magic pill, as you said, of reservations, but recognizing that there is inequality and wanting to address it.
Can I come in?
Yes.
I think that answers your question about democracy. Elections by itself doesn't bring all issues to the forefront. Representative democracy doesn't represent all constituencies, all issues. So while elections are important, I think to a certain extent you need a different kind of politics to articulate silences, suppressions, which any country faces. And I think that becomes important.
Well, that's precisely why we have the Constitution. I mean, our Constitution is the world's, I think, lengthiest Constitution. We have tremendous case law that's been built up around the Constitution and constitutional law. Many issues have been litigated on the Constitution. And we have, through parliamentary protocol and rules, learnt a way which very few other large democracies coming out of colonial rule have been able to pull off, as to how we deal with the diversity and manage to include everybody in the process.
But upholding the Constitution is majorly lying with the ruling party. That is when what Professor said holds good, because if the majority party doesn't take care of the groups which were already not part of the lawmaking or any process or any benefits.
But we have an independent
for
judiciary.
example,
if there's any way in which we are breaking the law, we are going against the Constitution, we'll be held
let me just finish.
Yeah.
So I'm saying, see, they've decided to come up with Polavaram ordinance, which practically changed the borders of 2 or 3 states. But because we don't have the majority, we could not stop it. And in fact, we were asked to go to court. I'm saying now the debate of Parliament being superior or the court being superior comes in. And then it again takes back us to the same question, that the ruling government should take everybody together and go in an inclusive manner.
Equal thing, but I just want to bring. Yes, go ahead.
It's not just a critique of BJP. I think we're looking at structures.
No,
that's the point I want to bring. So to a certain extent, let me put it this way. I love the Constitution, but I wish you'd rewrite the directive principles of state policy. It's pretty antiquated in many ways. All I'm asking for is new imaginations, new constituencies, new voices to be represented. That gives a richness to diversity which goes beyond the sudden sedateness of diversity that we have operated with so far.
And I feel like it's as important the role of the opposition to be part of this India building process. When we're talking about the culture and the India that we want to build over the next 10 years, what do our villages look like? What do our cities look like? What does a heterogeneous society look like? What do our laws look like? How do people from different minorities and religious background, do they walk around with a sense of freedom, or do they walk around with a sense of fear?
Yeah.
Now, in that particular aspect, the opposition holds as equally an important role as the ruling party. And in the fact
Gaurav,
that's
you're talking to a party that
democracy.
was in opposition for 10 years. You've just gotten into government for 60 days. I'm
So
glad you've settled into your role of opposition so quickly.
But
He's a first-time MP, so he didn't taste the time in the UPA.
No, but
was
I
in
hope,
power.
Jayant, you didn't go to your election saying that give me 60 days, give me 70 days, give me 80 days. You went with the promise that from day one you start working.
And that's exactly
I
the
hope
point.
so.
That is
You're
exactly,
not telling your
Gaurav,
voters that I'm only 60 days old in the
That is
first.
exactly the point I'm making, which is I said we went to the electorate saying give us 5 years, and you're giving us 60 days. All I'm saying is, and as I said in Parliament as well, this is not a T20 match. These are difficult, complicated issues that every democracy, I've spent 20 years in America. It's the oldest democracy in the world. Obviously you can ask whether the United Kingdom is a little older, but of course it's the one with the oldest constitution and so on. So you see them struggling with very similar sets of issues, and that is true across all advanced democracies. These are not easy problems, Gaurav. These are very difficult, complicated problems. As I said, we have a constitution, we have a judicial system, we have a parliament, we have all of you to give us, the appropriate sort of criticism when we go wrong. That's how we have to operate. We have to operate, as I said, in a temple of democracy.
Realize at some point, as Professor Visvanathan said, the time will have to come to make hard choices.
Yes.
The time has come to maybe not let certain MPs get away with the unparliamentary behavior that Professor Bose showed in behavior or an outside. We have to set the bar. We have to set the bar of what is parliamentary behavior.
The idea of a representative democracy is that when the time comes to make the hard choices, which is what you all did for 10 years, right? Then you demonstrate whether you can earn the trust of the people or not. At this point, we've earned the trust of the people. We'll have to make the hard choices, and we'll have to face the people just like you had to face the people.
And
so we'll be accountable.
And I think it's also a collective responsibility, because I think when MPs behave like this, it's not that people say, oh, those are Shiv Sena MPs or those are NDA MPs. People say these are MPs and look what politicians have come down to, which is a larger cynicism for politics.
But so we have to hold ourselves to a higher level of
taking it to because I wanted to look really at new ideas and new vision. All of you, of course, are from political families. How difficult do you find it to present, to actually come up with your own views, your own vision? And maybe I'll start with you, Kavitha, because of course your father is currently Chief Minister. How difficult do you find it to go your own path? Are you just your father's daughter? How do you establish your own identity, not just in terms of being an MP, but in terms of what your vision is for your constituency or your role as an MP?
I'm just fitting into the new role, but previously, last 7 years when I was working in the movement, I just didn't want to work under his shadow. So I floated my own organization which worked in its own way, and I had few times, you know, had different stands and vocally spoken about it in public arena. TRS as a party has different ideas, and me, Kavitha, my organization Jagruti has different. But now, of course, I'm a TRS MP, and TRS has become a ruling party there. So I have to, now, you know, be in the party line, and probably not as freely I can talk about, but not because I'm his daughter, but because I'm a member of that party. I'll have to respect the leader and his ideology, and have to basically stick into that, you know, stick to that framework which the party usually, you know, creates and puts MPs in.
Professor Bose, I want to ask you on that, because of course yours is a slightly different case in this sense, but I think Dipankar Gupta had made this observation just recently that when we talk about young MPs, we actually talk about old MPs, because what's new and what they're actually bringing to the table. So in that sense, when I look at you as a first-time MP and first-time ideas, how do you reconcile, because Mamata Banerjee's style of governance is controversial to say the least. I mean, we've seen the recent focus on whether it's rape cases or even the recent deaths because of encephalitis. And I think this point, I've talked to many MPs and Gaurav has made, well, health and education are areas where I know many MPs feel passionately about, but that's not what is the debate, that's not what grabs media headlines, and that's not what is on the national agenda, really, in a sense.
But
and maybe the state agenda as well.
But that's precisely the point, that those are the issues that are not grabbing the media headlines. But there is a lot that is happening in the area of rural development, particularly in the tribal areas in the western districts of Bengal. I think the Maoist problem has been tackled best in West Bengal among all of the states that have been confronted with that challenge. But I did want to say a word about the question of dynasticism, because I had to confront that issue head-on during my campaign, and in two different ways. First of all, of course, was the fact that I happen to belong to the family of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose by an accident of birth. And I made it clear in all of my political speeches that he used to say that his family and country are coterminous. So I claim no special privilege on that count, and you have to look at the individual credentials of members of that family. Have I done anything worthwhile in life? Do you think that I can bring integrity and some ability to the work that I have to do as your representative? The other, of course, was that my mother was a member of parliament from Jadavpur for 3 terms. But she too was an unusual politician. In fact, she wrote a book called An Outsider in Politics. She taught for 40 years, and after retiring as principal of a college, she had 3 terms in parliament. And I just hoped that the hiatus of 10 years means that there has been a bit of a gap. But I have to confess that her record helped me. One thing had changed. In my mother's time, my mother had to take the initiative to say that I'm going to help girls' schools and primary schools. This time I felt that there was a demand from the people that we want good schools, we want toilets in every girls' school in this constituency, and so on. So that was the one shift that I noticed. But we have to, you know, be individuals, and we have to even tell our constituents that look at us for what we are able to do for you as individuals. But I would also say that it is too early to think about re-election. We ought to do, at this point at least, at least up to, for the next 2 years, what we believe is right, what we believe will, take our society and our country forward. And as I said, that I think party leaderships, including my own, ought to be, more tolerant, perhaps, of both internal criticism and also new ideas, so that we can focus on the real issues, such as health and education.
You're a brave Trinamool congressman to say that. But Jayant, Sinha, to bring you in on that, because of course the BJP plank against the Congress was the Congress Baba Log, dynasty politics. Mr. Modi often addressed Rahul Gandhi as Shehzade, but many would turn around and say that why aren't you a Baba Log, or why aren't you a Shehzade then in that sense?
Well, first of all, I'm 51 years old. Right?
So you mean there's
an
age limit for Baba Log?
If you call me Baba Log, I'm flattered, right? Okay. You can see the graying hair on my temples. So I think I'm a little bit older than that. And to just build on what Professor Bose was saying, I think as far as family connections in politics are concerned, you have to really distinguish between one style of a family in politics, which I would call dynastic, and the other that I would call legacy. I think around this table you have two examples of people I would call sort of more in the dynastic bucket, and the others that I would call more on the legacy side. The dynastic I would define as people who are relatively younger, who've not necessarily had a career outside of politics, or maybe not a long career outside of politics, and then come into politics. Obviously there are privileges associated with that. For Professor Bose and myself, there are certainly privileges associated with our legacies. But we are much older, we've had very successful careers outside of politics, and therefore the case I could make, and I think that's the case that Professor Bose also made, was that yes, of course we are taking advantage, and we have had certain privileges because of our parents and so on, and our family, but what's drawn us to politics is not that we have some special privilege here, and it was easy entry to get in. What has drawn us to politics is public service. I left a
but
very...
But it would have been easier for you to get a ticket. It's rare that another 50-year-old would have got a ticket.
Well, let
me
just say the following. Let me just say the following, which is that if my name was Jayant Prajapati, I had the qualifications that I do, and I had spent 16 years in a constituency, helping out, working on a variety of social service projects, and worked for the party in the way that I have, I think I would have had a pretty good chance at getting a ticket. Right? So I think I would have gotten a ticket on my own merit. Of course I benefit from my father's legacy. I'm not denying that. I'm very privileged and fortunate to have him as my father. But I think that I bring something unique to the table as well. So you have to add that to the mix.
So
I'm going to get the dynasty once after you finish.
As family legacy is concerned, I sometimes feel that we are destined to be out of power, and that we might be better in opposition, because I kept pointing out that don't compare us with the Nehru-Gandhi dynasty, which has supplied, prime ministers for, 40 years after independence. And my grandfather was briefly in the interim government before independence, but no Bose has been a minister or in power post-independence.
So it really is public service.
Never say never,
it
Professor
really
Bose.
Let me just add one quick fact. My father's been in politics for 30 years. He's been in government for 6 years. So
and finance minister in those 6 years.
And he was leader of the Congress opposition in the in the Central Legislative Assembly in 1946. So I see pictures of him in the lobby. Well, so I'm actually quite enjoying my role in opposition.
But never say never, you'll never be minister. But the son and daughter of two chief ministers sitting opposite me. So go ahead, Gaurav Gogoi. I can call you Baba Log, but go ahead.
See, okay. What do you see as the difference between dynastic politicians
and legacy? I know that was
legacy politicians? Or would you disagree with that classification?
I would disagree with that.
I think in a huge political party, which the BJP and Congress and other parties are as well, there are so many qualified, deserving candidates who have come from the grassroots, who have come from different cities, or who have come from different backgrounds. So especially when there's a Lok Sabha election, where there are very limited number of seats, as you rightly pointed out, who gets the ticket, there's a lot of factors which come into play. There can be a person who's been working for the party for 45 years with a lot more grassroots connect and policy, and should he get the ticket, or somebody who has an impressive CV. So I think getting the ticket, really your family background really helps. But maybe it helps you for the first election as well. And after that, the next election doesn't help. In my own personal case, I never wanted to get into politics. I was always averse to politics. For me, it was it involved a lot of quarrels and less of work. So although was motivated by public service, my dream job was to become a CEO of a non-profit and work on rural development. But having seen the state of Northeast India, and especially Assam, where you don't have an industry, where you don't have an active civil society, what brought Assam from 2.6% economic growth to 8% till 2008? What brought down the level of violence? What increased the level of infrastructure was just good governance on the basis, on the back of a good political party. And that's what drew me into politics, because while being in the non-profit sector, it was very easy to sit and then and have intellectual conversations about the state of politics. But when I saw that in a complicated state in Assam, where there are so many ethnic communities, where we have an international border, where there are separatists wanting a separate autonomy, where there is annual floods, there's ecological crisis as well, and there is lack of industry. So to see the role, the meaningful role that politics played was eventually what drew me in. And it was actually during the 2012 or 2011 assembly election and 2012 panchayat election, where I just traveled across the state and I just saw the transformation. I had been inside houses where people told me that 10 years ago, Alpha terrorist would come, and now you are coming in that.